as impressive as the rise of Luminosity as one of the best teams in the world now, and coldzera emerging as a world star, someone who's a top 10 player in the world, perhaps even challenging one day to be a top 5 player in the world, if not already, I feel like a factor that's actually gone a little bit obscured is something that I said on the broadcast at Starladder, which is that FalleN is the best in-game leader in the world. So consider this for a second. In CSGO history, in fact, in Counter-Strike history, at all points in time, the best in-game leader has been European. There's maybe times when the odd North American could challenge them for it, but otherwise, Europeans have always had the best in-game leaders. They have the best tactics overall in general, and certainly it's the case in CSGO. We've had players like, obviously, we had Existence, and then we later on had guys like, we actually had Glaive for a while, and we had Carrigan, and we've had Zeus, and now later on we've had Starix. We've had a lot of great in-game leaders, but what's amazing is right now the best in-game leader in the world is Brazilian. It's FalleN from Luminosity. And if you understand FalleN's career and the progression of his team in CSGO, you'll see why this is so crazy, because he's not someone who has the 10 years or the 8 years or the 6 years as an in-game leader previously, like a Zeus or Existence, or like even Carrigan to a smaller degree. He at least has all of CSGO in general. This is a guy where in 1.6, he was a monster individual player AWPer. He was like a Kenny S type guy, except that he never had the teams around him to have the proper chance to accomplish what players like his predecessor, Kogu, had accomplished. So then he played Source later on, and he's a guy where he had to learn tactics. He had to learn that side of the game, and partly because there were no in-game leaders left. There were no great players left in Brazil. Brazil as a scene was dead. He had to start learning about the strategical side of the game. He started teaching lessons in Brazil. Then Kaboom appears, late 2014. They had FNX and they had Fur back then, but then the lineup changes a little bit. FNX goes out of the team. Then we come in 2015, and in the span of 1 year, he accomplishes so much. In this Luminosity team, at the time called Kaboom, later to be called Keyed later on in the year, all the single map upsets. The first thing that happened was they went into an era where they couldn't win a series against a top team. That's very difficult, and a lot of lesser teams did not do that. But he was able to pilot his teams towards so many single map upsets. They were nearly all on Mirage, the specialty map for them, Overpass, which was more of a stranger custom map back then a lot of teams didn't play, and Inferno, which was obviously a staple of many teams play, but more in the middle for most of the teams. These three maps were really the maps where his teams were able to get these big single map upsets. Obviously, they beat Cloud9, the Shazam team, on Mirage, MLG Aspen. They were able to beat Fnatic on Mirage at ClutchCon. They were able to beat Virtus Pro on Overpass in the round of 8 of ESL 1 Katowice. They were able to beat TSM on Inferno, ESL, ESAA Pro League Season 1 finals. Then they made the roster change. They brought in coldzera. Still, even though coldzera became a very good player, it was still a single map upset team. They beat Kingwin on Overpass in the Cologne group stage. They beat Cloud9 on Dust 2. At, let me think, where would that be? Cloud9, Dust 2. Presumably at an NA land towards the end of the year, I'd think, right? I haven't really thought of that one. Oh no, actually, what am I talking about? It's obviously DreamHack Cluj-Napoca group stage, yeah. They beat them on Dust 2 there, even though Cloud9 famously a Dust 2 team. At the same tournament, they beat Fnatic on Inferno, the original classic map for Fnatic, admittedly a close game. So the thing about this team was they could get single map upsets on top teams, and they placed in the quarterfinals of all 3 majors over the year. Whereas obviously NA teams haven't been in majors for now 4 majors or 5 or something. Well, there've been 4 that they haven't made it into, and it was 5 ago that one made it into round of 8. He made all 3 round of 8s of the majors, and they had all these upsets on best of 1 maps. Now, when you see these upsets, you really get a sense for how good the tactics were of the team and how much he was able to train his guys to get the most out of the limited skill set of talent that they had. Because when they would win these maps, they would nearly always be in really close fashion. And when they didn't win, they either lost in close fashion or got totally stomped. So when we talk about some of these upsets, we talk about when they beat Virtus Pro on Overpass at Katowice. That was an overtime game. When they beat TSM on Inferno, that was still a 16-12 game. When they beat Fnatic on Inferno, 16-13 game. These are really narrow wins, and they just get the most out of the tactics, get the most out of the skill, just take care of the intelligent situations, and they beat out teams that are much more skilled than them, much better in the world than them, and even on some of these cases, better on these maps than them. So very impressive stuff, but they were still always lacking that best of 3 win. And part of the reason they were lacking the best of 3 wins is they didn't have a good enough lineup. So, okay, they were able to get one decent best of 3 win over a top 10 ranked opponent, which was when they beat Titan at CEVO Season 8, which was in November, early November. And in this tournament, they beat them on Cash, they beat them on Cobble. Admittedly, Titan was a mess at the time. Of those maps, only really... I mean, those were decent maps for Titan, actually. But Titan was obviously a mess. They'd bombed out of the major. They'd choked pretty hard towards the end of it. But okay, decent team. Problem is, they play Titan again later on to decide who gets in the playoffs, and Titan beats them in that series, so not as impressive when you take that into account. They were able to, at one of the NA lands, let me think, it was probably the first one, so I assume it was iBuyPower. No, it wouldn't have been. Let me think. It'd be RGM Pro Series. They were able to beat Team Liquid in an overtime game on Overpass. Team Liquid was obviously a good Overpass team. They beat them in overtime there in map 2 of the series, I think it was. And that was the one where Team Liquid still won the series. So again, they're still not winning series. Then they make the big roster move. Then they bring in Taco and they bring in FNX. And when they bring in Taco and FNX, that's where you've seen all these incredible results since then. Since then, they've managed to win 8 big-time series that were all notable. They managed to beat Envious. They've managed to beat NIP. They've managed to beat TSM twice. They've managed to beat, let me think, Na'Vi. They've managed, 7 series actually. And they've managed to beat FaZe twice. And they were called, well, yeah, FaZe Gamers 2, the same squad basically. So they won best of 3 series of them. But even then, the first time they did it was the run where they just brought in Taco and FX 2 days before. So all these series were 2-1s. And all these had close maps in them. Then they obviously lost to Fnatic in the final of DreamHack Winter. But even then, they took a map. They took Train off Fnatic, which was a more shaky map for Fnatic. And it's one that they were getting in their arsenal. Even then, in the series they lost, they took a nice map. Then they go to the Star Ladder. Now it's way more impressive results. Now they're beating G2 2-0. They're beating Na'Vi 2-0. Then they go over... obviously losing very close fashion to Fnatic again on the 3rd map of the semi-final there. Then they go over to DreamHack Leipzig in Germany. They beat FaZe, formerly G2, 2-0. Massive scores. They beat Astralis reasonably easy, actually. Yes, Overpass was close, but Train was pretty much a stomp, and Astralis can be good on Train. Beat them 2-0. So now, forget the single map upsets. Now they're winning best of 3s, and now they're even winning over top teams, top 10 ranked teams, 2-0, and winning big time scores. That's because they've gotten the better players into the lineup. Now they've added that to their tactics. Now they've added that to team play. Now they've added that to understandings of how to play in power play. And this all comes from FalleN and what he's been able to bring to the team in terms of as an overall approach. The frags alone would not do it. So, okay, the first era was the era of upsets. They had less skill in the team, but they had good tactics already. And they had those 2 or 3 maps. It was usually 2 at a time that they were dangerous on. And so with the normal with the normal ban and then pick process, a team could ban out Mirage, but then they'd get Overpass. A team could ban out Overpass, but they'd get Inferno. They could do it this way and could still get one good map in the series, and they could get this upset as a result. And teams were willing to play them on maps like Mirage and occasionally, Inferno, Overpass. Also, early on in this low skill era, they made the most of Fur. Fur was this monster aggressive entry fragger that they really rode, and he helped their T-sides work, and obviously FalleN's tactics were what he was executing. Then along came coldzera. Okay, Fur kind of took a bit more of a backseat now, but now they had coldzera. Not that same entry fragging aggressive style, now more of the cleanup style, now allowing them to be better in the power play scenarios where they're up 3v2, they're up 4v2, they're up on CT side and they have the bomb down somewhere, and they cover the position properly because now they've got this really strong, solid rifler, can also use the AWP in terms of just as like a pick-off weapon to hold one angle, not necessarily a great AWPer, and just using the different skill set now of a top player, and that's who became their main carry at this point in time. And then when coldzera came to the lineup, now FalleN started shifting over and he was becoming the primary AWP, and he started to have big games. He'd always be usually getting the entry kills and the first kills even on CT side to set up them to be in these power play situations from which he could then kind of quarterback the win in the round. So then they got the first best of 3 crazy upset win. Now when they got the new players in, and now they had FNX in, is clutching to add into the mix, now they became this really complete team. Now they took the step up towards becoming a legitimate elite level team. And again, thanks to how FalleN's put it together, because it all starts with their T-sides. They have arguably the best T-sides in the game when you consider relative to the skill level of the players and the experience. Okay, maybe people like Envious can outdo them sometimes. Maybe Na'Vi can look better at times with Guardian and Flamey, all these guys rolling. But in some senses, in a relative contextual sense, you could make a case that Luminosity has the best T-sides. Like sometimes when they lose around, it was the right tactic and it was well executed. They didn't always get the kills. So yes, coldzera is the workhorse that puts forward the big performances, that allows them in terms of the heavy lifting to be in position to win these games, but FalleN makes it happen with the T-side tactics. FalleN makes it happen with the opening entry frags, with the AWP, and going head to head with great AWPers like a Kenny S, or like a Guardian, or like a Device, going head to head with these guys, Olaf Meister obviously, and then quarterbacking the power plays. The power plays are one of the areas where I think they're one of the best in the game. Knowing intelligently what to do from these better situations. As a result, to me, that's why those key times when they fucked up a power play, like the 5v3 or whatever it was against Fnatic on Inferno, and like the like 5v2 or something they had against Na'Vi that they lost, that's why those are so notable, that they stand out. They don't do that often, and when they do, it's been a big key deciding factor. Usually they're winning most of those scenarios, where actually teams like Envious, Fnatic throw away a lot of those scenarios sometimes and rely on individual skill from behind to win the round. That's not the approach of Luminosity, and that's how you know that tactics and good leadership and reading the game are taking a big part of the game. Another reason why you have to say they're one of the best T-side tactics teams is, yes, they have Fur, who can be a beast. Yes, they have FalleN, but they don't have a Guardian, a super godlike AWPer who can open rounds up for you and who you set the whole game up for. You get the mid control, then let him work. They don't have Apex, who can get super hot and drop 50 kills in a 2-map series and go mental on T-sides. They don't have that sort of crazy skill that gives you a luxury to win rounds. They're doing it all with the tactics and the methodical approach. That's why you see this extremely good power play type scenario. Also, now that they've got the skill around them, now you see suddenly they're not just a team that was good on 3 maps or 2 out of 3 maps at a time. Now they've got this complete map pool. Now they've got Mirage, a classic map they've always been good on, still good on it. Now they've got Train, they've become one of the stronger Train teams, and that's a very tactical map. Inferno, they've got this to a pretty good level considering they tend to play beasts on Inferno. Overpass and Cache are in the middle, so we're already talking about 5 maps they can definitely play. Then you go to the lower maps. Okay, Dust 2 and Cobble, yeah, are more towards the lower end. They don't really want to play these maps in general. They can play a little bit of Cobble, not against the better teams though. But you see, if you've got 5 out of 7 maps, you're already in the best in the world in terms of strength of map pool. And so have 3 strong maps means you're going to have really good chances in these series, at least to make it competitive, if not win, and sometimes steal an opponent's map. So you can already see, once all the pieces are in part, all the parts are in place, now FalleN's system is activated to be so successful. And you can see he's already in the position where his team's almost winning events. They're really on the cusp at this point. You can notice that the trend is the maps that they're doing so well at are the ones where historically it was harder to get T-side rounds, especially against good teams on those maps. But now his team's at a position where they can do that. He's also shown a proficiency at making shit up on the fly. Think about a DreamHack Winter, where essentially he had to create a lot of stuff on the fly because he had 2 new players. But that game against Envious on Cobblestone, and Envious were gods on Cobblestone at that point in time. And he had that round where he just made it up on the fly, and they went up A, smoked it off, so Envious thought they're coming into A, and went through the connector to B. Now, no one does that. You would never do that. You either go B, and you go drop down into B, or through the main entrance, or you go A. No one would think to do this. It was an innovation, it was impromptu, and it was a great strategy. It was quite brilliant in the way it was called, actually, and set up as well. And that's the other thing. You look at the T-sides of this team, and they are so methodical. They do slowly cover angles and take them. They do slowly take control of an area using Molotovs, using flashes, using smokes. Then they set up, then they get the aim duels they want. Then they take over a site, and they have the right players coming at the right time. So coldzera's coming in when he's got the backup in front of him, so he can follow a guy up and trade for that kill. He's not having to ever go first and take a crazy aim duel. He's not doing an Envious style where you spread out across the map and take whatever fights you want. It's not that style at all. And there's a logic to how the guns work in the team. Who has the AWP? Who has a rifle at this point? When do we go for the force buy? Not all the time, but when we do it, it's got to be the right time. We've got to have a tactic set in mind for it. This is where you can see FalleN shining through within the game. There's also the factor that he himself has now started to have the occasional star performance. I mean, you saw this last term at DreamHack Leipzig, he was unreal. Then you look at StarLadder, he would have single maps, single halves, where he would go head to head with the best players in the world, the best AWPs in the world, and he would play as well as them, and he would have as many impact AWP kills as they were getting with rifles. He'd have these specific games where when you have coldzera consistently being very good, and you have Fur sometimes coming with big games, and you have an FNX winning clutches for you, then when FalleN comes in with this ability to have an impact with the weapon and tactically use it, now you're going to win big maps, as they've done. Now you're going to win series. Now you're going to be one of the best teams in the world and challenge for trophies. So you look at it, This guy's made a complete team. And remember, he recruited all these guys. He had Fur in the early days and knew to build the team around him. He got in coldzera later on and understood how to use him in the team. He then got in FNX, an old guy who'd just been okay since before then, and was able to fill this role of the veteran, smart guy, winning the clutches and playing within this system. And all the roles make sense within the team. FalleN is just the complete package as an in-game leader. He's got the tactics, fantastic tactics, constantly innovative, but have a baseline level where he can run the same ones over and over again if they're working. He can read the opponents in the game and shift up his tactics. So if he's playing a very skilled team who's breaking something down, they don't always go to the same default setup. He's great at recruiting talent. He now has skills himself that are legit to show off. One of the best fraggers of all the in-game leaders in the world right now. And he's also, crucially, this is what makes him the complete package. He's shown leadership in terms of motivation, in terms of maintaining the morale of his troops. Because we've had great leaders like a God B, who weren't necessarily always in control of the egos within the team. We've had great leaders like Sean Gers, but who couldn't actually keep people in track and motivate them always to spend less time pogging, spend more time practicing, spend less time on the stream, spend more time in the server watching demos. He couldn't always manage that side. He was the tactician more than that. FalleN is just like, this guy, you've just got to respect him. He's a man's man. He's a guy who just leads from the front, and he's got all these people in place, and he's taught all these guys, and he's got them all to buy into his system. They're all on board with him, and he's just accomplished something fantastic, really. I mean, at the moment, who are his rivals? Well, until recently, you just said Karrigan, because TSM have all the pieces to be fantastic. We had an excellent map pool. We're one of the most consistent teams in the world. They've fallen off a bit, mainly because they don't seem to trust Karrigan as much, and some of his players are having issues. Not necessarily his fault, but it's hard to be as effective right now. Starix is obviously doing a fantastic job with Na'Vi. They're extremely good, but then again, they do rely so much on Guardian, so much on Flamey if they're going to win any big tournaments. You look at it, for me, FalleN at the moment, it has like a little bit. He's standing out as the best in-game leader in the world. So you know what? If for some reason you've fallen in skrill quantity, you should know that Alpha Draft is effing extremely good as a service for playing fantasy esports. Don't just dream of that big upset and be sat around with a big fat coldzera for your efforts. Play at Alpha Draft and you could win money to buy all the tacos you want, you fat fuck. Well, unless you're not fat, in which case, apologies. I don't know. I don't really care, do I? They'd keyed into what you want from a fantasy esports site and provided the setup that can make your bank account go kaboom. Squill.